gentlemen, thank you all very much for coming. My name is Paul Farrow. I am the chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. The 20 is in the mail. I am the chairman of the Marlborough Republican City Committee. What is the Marlborough Republican City Committee? It is the Republican Party for right here in the city of Marlborough. And the Boston Globe called us the epicenter of the Massachusetts Republican Party because we are, with all due deference to my fellow RTC chairs in the room, one of the most, if not the most active local party committees in the state. We help candidates from Provincetown, not actually in Provincetown, to Stockbridge and everywhere in between, and we've helped elect easily half of the Republicans in the legislature that are there today through our assistance. And in 2010, there was a young gentleman running against an incumbent Democrat in the town of Whitman, and we gave him a little bit of assistance. I don't want to take any credit because he took us off, but the result was he was one of 12 Republicans to defeat a Democrat that year. That is the first time a Democrat has been defeated as an incumbent in an election since 1990. And we helped all 12 of those candidates in varying degrees of between $1,000 and $10,000, including our own former state representative, Steve Levy, who stepped out of the room because I was going to refer to him. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce our next Republican senator, the man who will go down in history as not only a wonderful United States senator, but the man who defeated Elizabeth Warren. He's the real deal, Geoff Diehl.
What can I do for you? What can I do for us?
Get elected.
What can I do for Massachusetts? That should be the first thing when your U.S. Senator wakes up. The first thing on their mind is, what can I do for you? What can I do for us? What can I do for Massachusetts? It should be the last thing that your United States Senator thinks when she or he goes to bed at night. What can I do for you? What can I do for us? What can I do for Massachusetts? Because working for the people of Massachusetts should be job number one down in Washington, D.C. Job number one is not writing 2 books while you're serving on our dime in office. Job number one is not hoping that the president fails and that the American people don't get the change they need in Washington, D.C. And job number one is not asking to be reelected so you can run for president in 2 years. That is not putting Massachusetts first. So let me ask you, what has Elizabeth Warren done for Massachusetts? That's my...
She's embarrassed us.
Embarrassed us. Nothing. Anything else?
He's a good idiot.
I'm not even sure about that. Folks, this race is about who is going to serve you down in Washington, D.C. That's what this race is about. I could probably spend a full day talking about Elizabeth Warren and the fact that she is pretty much a hypocrite on every issue out there. Whether it's saying that kids can't afford college educations and then she takes a $430,000 salary to teach 1 class at Harvard, okay? Whether it's the fact that she says that small businesses in the country, in Massachusetts, aren't paying women enough, and we found out on Equal Pay Day that she only pays women in her office 71 cents on the dollar compared to what she pays the men in her own Senate office. She's made $1.6 million for herself writing 2 books while she's been serving in office. And she's been flying around for 4.5 years raising money for Democrats and not doing anything for Massachusetts. Can you name one bill that she's passed that's helped the state of Massachusetts? No.
Can you name one that you proposed?
Right. And Scott Brown, the guy she defeated, got 3 of his own bills passed in just 2 years when he was in office. And he was elected, had to basically rerun. And I don't know if you guys remember this, he was working in a trailer outside the Capitol building for a portion of time because they had to clear out the old office for him to even move in. Scott Brown got 3 things done. Elizabeth Warren has voted against a bill called the 21st Century Cures Act. Anybody know what the 21st Century Cures Act is? 21st Century Cures Act was a bill, one of the last bills to pass under President Obama. It had Vice President Joe Biden's cancer moonshot funding in there. Every Democrat from Massachusetts, every 9 congressmen and women, the other Senator Ed Markey, all voted for it. Elizabeth Warren voted against it. It basically was NIH, National Institute of Health funding, that goes primarily to Massachusetts research hospitals to try to end terminal illnesses like cancer. She voted against that. So she voted against jobs, and she voted against people trying to find a cure to make sure that we don't lose anybody else in our families. That's Elizabeth Warren. And now she's asking us to be reelected so she can spend 2 more years doing nothing but continuing to go around the country. While at a time when our state is suffering 3 straight years of budget cuts, 3 straight years of not being able to afford proper education funding for our towns. Healthcare has gone from 29% of our state budget to 42% of our state budget. 42%, and it's growing. Where is she to help try to fix that? She's nowhere. In fact, a day after Congressman Scalise was shot in the hip when those Republicans were playing baseball, she went on the floor of the Senate and said that Republicans were looking for blood money when they were going to reform health care. In fact, that we were going to kill people. She said people will die from the reforms. That's the kind of language that only puts Americans against Americans, divides us as a country, doesn't help solve the problems. We don't need Elizabeth Warren. We need to repeal and replace health care, but we also need to repeal and replace Elizabeth Warren, in my opinion, down in Washington. So who am I, right? A lot of you folks may not know me. Some of you guys do. I know Paul does. And by the way, the Marlborough Republican City Committee does an amazing job of supporting candidates. They look at the candidates, they talk to them, make sure that they're going to be conservative up on Beacon Hill. When Steve came in, sat right to my left up in the House chamber in 2010, I knew that Steve Levy was going to vote with me no matter what the Democrats said on every issue that was important to you, because he followed through on his promises when he was elected, and I've done the same thing. Everything I promised, I followed through on. To the point where I've been elected 4 times to the legislature. The last 2 times, I've been unopposed. Now that may sound, oh great, you know, I'm sure that's what happens. Incumbents just can win easily. Well, let me tell you about my district, because Paul didn't mention the district I was running in. Yes, there was a 2-term incumbent in there, but it was also a district that had been Democrat for 14 years straight. John Walsh, the Democratic Party chair, who brought us to Val Patrick and is now running SETI Warren against Charlie Baker, John Walsh lived in the town of Abington. Okay, my district is Abington, Whitman, East Bridgewater. So John Walsh was in Abington. Shannon O'Brien, who ran against Mitt Romney for governor, lives in the town of Whitman. Our daughters were on the same soccer team. She stopped talking to me after I filed to run as a Republican as a state rep. I got lucky there. So, it's a great move. I should have done it years ago. And then my opponent was from the 3rd town, East Bridgewater, and his father had been state rep, state senator before him. His father was register of probate. I didn't know what I didn't know about politics. I was 40 years old. I had 2 daughters. At the time, they were 6 and 2. I was working for a sign company out of New Bedford, doing work. I did a lot of work with Santander Bank, which was formerly Sovereign. I did a lot of work with with businesses, getting their signs done. The last big project I worked on was the Citgo sign. We changed out all the neon to LED. So big projects, and I was pretty successful. And my wife and I own a small business in the neighboring town of Hanson, right next to our town of Whitman. She runs a performing arts school, and I'm kind of the janitor on the weekends, so yeah. And, you know, I was doing well, she was doing well, and like I said, I was 40, and I joined, I gotta back up a second. I also was an Eagle Scout. I was in Boy Scouts. Anybody involved in scouting? You know, in scouting you learn a lot about citizenship, trying to do a good turn daily. One of the things I like to say is leave the campground better than you found it. And that's sort of been something in my life. People have helped me along the way, whether it was in school, college, my career, even politics. People who didn't have to help me have helped me along the way. And so I've always felt, probably like you, that you want to give back when you can. You're looking for a chance to give back. So I decided I was going to join the town finance committee, and I joined the finance committee, and that's where I found out that we had the state rep that kept voting not to increase education funds, not to increase local aid that we need in our towns. And I said, is anybody going to run against this guy? And so this was 2008, and nobody was going to run against him. And I said, it's too late, you have to have filed by now. I said, well, how do I do this? They said, join your local Republican town committee. So I did, and I read 2 books on how to run for office. I put together a game plan of election day and what I had to do between then and election day to win, and we ended up, you know, going door to door as often as I could. So I, for 2 summers, knocked on every door I could and ended up winning that surprise race. And I was an underdog in the race, but it was really worth it. It was a great year. 2010, we doubled the number of Republicans from 16 to 32. We brought great people in like Steve, like Shauna O'Connell from Taunton, like Jim Lyons, like Mark Lombardo, people who continue to this day. This very morning, we had a press conference to fight the SJC decision to keep local law enforcement from working with ICE officials to deport illegal immigrants. We actually had a press conference today on a bill that we just filed to try to fix that. All right?
Yes.
So we've never let down on trying to fulfill the promises that you guys expect from us when we serve on Beacon Hill. And in 2011, I was selected as an emerging leader. I got to go to University of Virginia with 49 other legislators from around the country, got to talk about state and national issues, learn a lot about that, met some great folks. And then 2013, 2014 was really when things hit the fan. That was when Deval Patrick decided he was going to put together the largest tax increase in Massachusetts history. $2 billion. $2 billion. It included soda tax, candy tax, another dollar on tobacco, the tech tax, which thankfully got repealed 6 weeks later. But it had the gas tax indexing in there as well. Nobody knew that their gas tax, by the way, went up by 3 cents, and they had no idea that it was indexed to go up automatically every year with inflation. This is Massachusetts, folks. This is the state where there's no taxation without representation. It was going to be the only tax that would go up automatically every year without a vote. It's one of the most regressive taxes because it hits middle to low income families the most. Not just what you pump into your car, but what you pay in all the goods that are transported in the state. Your municipalities aren't exempt from the gas tax, so all those police cars, fire trucks, school buses, that would have added to your tax burden too through your property tax. This was a $2 billion tax hit to everybody. That's what the Globe blamed us for when we actually got this thing repealed. And I was fortunate enough to get involved early and be the face of it with TV and radio and go around the state and talk to groups everywhere. But I was very lucky to work with a huge team of people. Probably a lot of folks in here who held signs, held banners on overpasses, got signatures. You guys probably remember Howie Carr. We were on Howie Carr all the time, telling people how to print out the form, and it had to be double-sided to be turned in. It was crazy. And nobody thought we were going to do this. When we announced that we were doing the ballot question, the press laughed at us, literally laughed at us when we said we're going to get this done with an all-volunteer group. But we did it. We got 120,000 signatures. Think about that, 120,000. We only needed 67 and then another 11,000. But that many people cared enough to get it done. And we won 53 to 47. We outperformed Governor Baker by 40,000 votes. Sorry, 50,000 votes. 50,000 votes. And then Baker gets inaugurated. January 2015, we find out the Boston 2024 Olympic Committee says, hey, we're going to have the Olympics in Massachusetts, right? Yay! Except that the Olympics have an average overrun of $10 billion in the last 5 Olympics. And taxpayers are always on the hook for it. London went from 5 billion to 15 billion. Montreal had the 76 Olympics, just finished paying off the bonds a few years ago.
Wow.
And the Boston 2024 folks wanted things like tearing down the trees on the common, put up a temporary stadium, take it down and put trees back up. That was one of their plans. They wanted VIP lanes in and out of Boston because it's no problem getting in and out of Boston every day for work, right? They wanted VIP lanes that they would reserve. And Deval Patrick, who was no longer governor, was getting paid $7,500 a day to sell that boondoggle. So I filed language in the House to prevent taxpayers from being on the hook for the overruns. No surprise, it didn't pass, okay? But I worked with a guy named Evan Falchuk who had just run for governor as an independent, United Independent. He had his team that was very opposed to this. I had the folks from the gas tax that said, what's next? What can we stop next? They were energized. We got together and said, let's do another ballot question. We filed the language, and a week later, Boston 2024 took off. They left. So we saved taxpayers at least another $10 billion, or another Big Dig Part 2. You know, I know people are looking at this like, it's Elizabeth Warren, she's got tons of money in the bank. Okay, yeah. But Hillary Clinton had a ton of money to spend against Donald Trump, and she lost. And speaking of Donald Trump, I was very lucky to get invited to be co-chair for his campaign here in Massachusetts. And I spent another year, even though my wife said, you know, you can take a summer off. I said, no, you got to do what's right. Trump spoke to me, as he spoke to a lot of people in this state and this country, by saying that DC is not doing its job. Just like Beacon Hill, they're not listening to the people anymore. They're not working for the people who sent them there. Trump talked about securing our borders. I know over there in the corner, you want to make sure that illegal immigration stops. We can't have sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. It's costing us $1.8 billion a year out of our state budget at minimum, and it's costing us lives. Matthew Denise dragged to his death by an illegal immigrant who should have been deported. That doctor, those two doctors that had their throats cut by the man who had robbed 2 banks, should have been deported, but the activist judge gave him a 364-day sentence instead of 365, because 365 would have triggered a deportation, and that judge didn't want him deported. That's what's wrong with Massachusetts, and it's what's wrong in Washington, D.C. You've got Elizabeth Warren, who is completely for open borders. Forget the fact that she's for single-payer health care, which is will be a disaster. If you enjoy Canadians coming to, I guess the good thing is we won't have Canadians coming to the United States for medical care because they can't get it in a timely manner with their single-payer service. We're going to be in the same boat. Government has to ultimately ration health care if they become the only payer. And they will determine whether you should get that new hip, whether you should get that liver replacement, whatever it is going to be, you're going to have that determined by government, not by your own decisions. Okay, that's the problem there. And free tuition. Elizabeth Warren is for free tuition. I know that I want my kids at some point in life to feel like they have skin in the game. That if they're going to earn something like a college degree, that they should earn it with their own hard work as well. But when does it end? When does it end when government basically tells you they're going to provide the health care, they're going to give you free education. You have to make at least $15 an hour, but you can't make more than $1 million in Massachusetts, or they're going to take more from you. They're boxing you in to basically determine what your life is going to be, and that's not the role of government. That is not the role of government. Donald Trump sees that. He ended up in Massachusetts winning the primary in the state with 50% of the vote. It was the largest margin of victory until he hit his home state of New York. And by the way, in the race was people like Kasich and Rubio and Chris Christie and others. So he didn't just win by a fluke here in Massachusetts. That was a strong win for Donald Trump. And 20,000 Democrats in Massachusetts unenrolled to vote for Donald Trump. Even Democrats now realize, especially the unions, that Washington is, with the illegal immigrants undercutting their salaries, taking away public housing that's supposed to be available for people who need it, including our veterans that come back and can't find work. Illegal immigration is killing our country in ways that we don't even know economically. And yet that's the goal down there, is to continue these games, not representing you. Scott Brown won in 2010 because he said he was going to be the 41st vote against Obamacare. It's hard for Republicans to win in the state, I totally agree. But Scott Brown ran a clear message and worked hard to get that message out there. Charlie Baker said he was going to be a better manager of state services, and so far he's been living up to that promise. He's doing a better job managing what's going on Beacon Hill. In fact, again, just giving you a quick timely moment here, today we were supposed to be in for session for the Democrats to override all of Charlie Baker's budget vetoes, meaning he cut money out of the budget, and they wanted to restore a couple $100 million back in. They decided they're not going to do it. They're not going to actually go and spend more money they don't have. And so the session today ended up being abbreviated, and we didn't go forward with that. That's a really good sign that Charlie Baker was able to back the Democrats down from overspending. So I want to give him a round of applause for doing that as well. But nobody said this Senate race was going to be easy. And nothing that's worth something as major as this is going to be easy. But did anybody tell the Patriots it was going to be easy to win the Super Bowl again this year? You guys remember that? 28-3 in the third quarter. I think Gostkowski had even missed another field goal in that second half, right after the halftime. It was crazy. Nobody thought they were going to win. And the team stuck together. They persevered and they won. And I'll tell you why. Because Bill Belichick is an amazing leader. And Tom Brady's an incredible talent. But Bill Belichick has 5 rules of leadership, and I won't bore you with all 5, but I'll tell you, numbers 4 and 5 stick out to me. I'll tell you what they are. Look up the rest because it's worth it. But 4 is, you should care about what the people you work with care about. That's number 4 for Bill Belichick. And it applies to government as well, or at least to me, and what I've brought to public service. And I care about what the people care about who sent me up to Beacon Hill. If you care about that, you care about other people and what they're thinking, you're going to deliver for them. And that's how he found success. Number 5 is don't rest on your laurels. So I've had success inside the legislative chamber. I've had success outside with ballot questions and supporting candidates and ideas that win. This is the next moment. This is the moment, though, where it's not necessarily about me. It is about everybody. It's about this movement that's been gathering steam since 2010. Since we took back a bunch of seats up in the State House, and in Washington, we took back the House, the Senate, and now have the presidency. We need someone who's going to go to Washington, D.C. and work for the people of Massachusetts. Even Ted Kennedy, who was no friend of Republicans, Ted Kennedy was the liberal line of the Senate, but he would go down there and work with Republican presidents after elections were over and Republican governors here in the state to deliver for the people of Massachusetts. That's what you expect. At least I hope that's what you expect. And so I've got 16 months to make my case, night after night, place after place, still up on Beacon Hill working for you during this next year, making sure that you know that I'm going to represent your interests down in Washington, D.C. and up on Beacon Hill. And if I'm given the opportunity to serve a 6-year term in the U.S. Senate, you better believe that I'm going to get things done. If you think Elizabeth Warren is going to have a seat at the table with Donald Trump and his administration, after everything she's done to block all of his cabinet members, after everything she's done to try to divide this country, you're mistaken. She will have no ability to get things done if she's reelected. I will deliver from day one, and I promise you, if you can give me the support, whether it's Facebook, posting that you were here, Facebook or Twitter if you do that, or just talking to friends and neighbors, taking literature, filling out the volunteer form, sending it in, maybe writing a check, that'd be really great. Anything that you guys can do, I'm going to be working as hard, if not harder, to make sure that we win in November and that you have that voice down in Washington. So thank you guys very much for having me out tonight.